The World Beyond the Headlines lecture series is a project of the University of Chicago Center for International Studies.
Tonight we welcome Peter Eichstaedt to the University of Chicago. Peter Eichstaedt is a veteran journalist and author dedicated to revealing the stories behind human rights abuses. He has traveled extensively in Africa to cover war crimes and trials and is the former senior editor for Uganda Radio Network and the Africa editor for the Institute of War and Peace and Reporting in The Hague. He most recently served as country director for the Institute for War and Peace Reporting in Afghanistan. His writing has appeared in publications that include the Denver Post, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Los Angeles Times. He is the author of several books, including Consuming the Congo, War and Conflict Minerals in the World's Deadliest Place. Tonight, he will be discussing his book, Pirate State, Inside Somalia's Terrorism at Sea, which explores the links between the pirates, global financiers, and extremists who control southern Somalia. Please join me in welcoming Peter Eichstaedt.
Well, thank you very much. It's really heartwarming for me to see so many people come out and to talk about this difficult subject in a very remote corner of the world when it's raining and blustery out there. But it makes me feel like I haven't wasted significant portions of my life researching these kind of stories and writing about them. Just a little bit about myself, not to brag, but just so you know a little bit about my background. I started working as a journalist when I was 16, and one of the things I fell into the profession because I dearly wanted to meet this Swedish exchange student who was a student in our high school, and I'm terribly shy. I've always been terribly shy, and back then I couldn't think of a way to ever talk to her until somebody suggested, why don't you interview her for the paper? And I thought, what a great idea. And voila, I was a journalist. And so I did interview her, but I don't even remember her name now, but I've been a journalist ever since. More recently, I've worked in Eastern Africa, which resulted in this book. Also, my earlier book called First Kill Your Family, which is about child soldiers of northern Uganda. And interestingly, it's still an issue. That book, First Kill Your Family, focused on this renegade militia called the Lord's Resistance Army that is still roaming Central Africa. And just 2 weeks ago, President Obama signed an order sending what's actually the second contingent of U.S. Special Forces to go help the Ugandans see if they can finally nail this guy. Not that I'm in favor of killing people, but this militia has been responsible for the death of about 100,000 innocent people in Central Africa. That was one book I did, and it subsequent to that, I did a book more recently, which I'll be talking about tomorrow, on conflict minerals in Eastern Congo, and how the fact that these minerals end up in our computers and cell phones, that every day we contribute to an ongoing tragedy in Eastern Congo. I'll be talking about that tomorrow. Tonight, though, I want to talk about Somali pirates, and let's go to what we all know, or hopefully know, is that most recently the Somali pirates it came into the American consciousness on April 8th of 2009, when they hijacked the Maersk Alabama, which is a U.S. flagged ship that had picked up a load of grain on the Red Sea. They were coming through around where was it? They were coming around the Horn of Africa. And they were hijacked, and this was an American crew, and it became an immediate sensational story. And this saga went on for about 5 days, I believe. And what happened is that the Somali pirates were able to climb aboard this ship. The ship was actually carrying grain to Mogadishu that was going to be distributed to Somali refugees. the Somali pirates hijacked that ship. The crew was able to hide in what they call the safe room. And a couple of the guys in the crew, though, never ended up in the safe room. And they were able to overpower one of the pirates and took him as captive. And this allowed them to regain control of the ship, because they started talking with the other pirates, and they negotiated a deal where they would release this guy back if the pirates would leave the ship or release their captive. And the pirates, made a little switch at the last minute. They took the captain hostage. And this guy was Captain Richard Phillips, and he wrote a book about this. But anyways, the story ended up, the U.S., we had 2 naval destroyers tracking these pirates. They'd escaped in this lifeboat. And we tracked these guys, and we're getting very, very close to, they came around here, they were getting very, very close to shore, and the Navy had brought some Navy SEALs onto the destroyer and had these guys in the scope. And after 5 days, they revealed them. Well, they had been revealing themselves, but anyway, what happened is that the Navy SEALs shot them. Snipers got them. And Captain Phillips was rescued, and like I said, he went on to write a book, and that book is being made into a movie that's going to star Tom Hanks. Anyway, the U.S. involvement in Somalia goes back quite a ways. It didn't start in 2009 with this hijacking. We were involved in there right after 1991, when the government of Somalia collapsed. And it created this huge humanitarian disaster. And it was the traditional photographs that you see of starving Somali children. And it generated a large outpouring of international aid to go to Somalia. Well, the U.S. at the time participated, and we sent a contingent of Marines to help keep the peace there. That was in 1992, and what happened is within a year, the situation had gotten so desperate there that that's when the incident that we all know from Black Hawk Down, in which the Somali, this group of U.S. Army Rangers was trapped by Somali fighters, in Mogadishu. And 18 Rangers were killed, and they in turn claimed to have taken anywhere from 800 to 1,000 Somali fighters at the time. Well, anyway, those are the 2 most recent primary events that link this country with Somalia. But this issue's been the Somali piracy's been going on a long time, and what I want to talk about is who these guys are. Every now and then you hear about Somali pirates being involved in a hijacking or a kidnapping or something. But very little is talking about, who these guys are, where they come from. And if you look at the issue at all, you very, very quickly will find that the pirates will defend themselves by saying, we're simple fishermen. We're simply defending, our rights to fish have been taken away. We're simply defending ourselves. And I was really, when I was doing research, I was really curious about this. It's a good story, and I wanted to see if it was true. And as it turns out, the basis of their claim is completely legitimate. What's been going on for years and years is fishing. A lot of international fishing ships or boats have come around this area, and it's very, very rich in sea life. And a lot of international trawlers go there, capture, tons and tons of fish. They have, it's a modern fishery it's fast frozen, and they're making, hundreds of thousands of dollars easily, perhaps millions, with one load. And so this area out there was being heavily fished, and what really made this incident another claim that was being made was that their fishing waters had been contaminated from dumping. And that was another issue I wanted to look into, and as it turns out, they do have a legitimate claim. And that claim became very apparent when the famous Christmas tidal wave came across. What was it, in 2005, I believe, when the tidal earthquake hit, western Indonesia. It sent a tidal wave all the way across the ocean, and it even impacted this part of Puntland up there, Somalia. Well, what happened is when that wave came charging across the Indian Ocean, it swept, of course, onto land here. And when the water receded, there was all kinds of garbage, and some of it was toxic. And as it turns out, the UN did an investigation. As it turns out, some of this waste was radioactive waste. And what had been going on is that it's been very difficult to prove, but the suspects are that the Italian mafia was involved with collecting radioactive medical waste from Europe. And they were taking these waste and then dumping it out in the fishing waters out there. And the reason they were doing that is because they made deals with the people that were controlling the communities on land. And at the time, the claim that was being made by the Somalis that their fishing grounds had been trashed, well, had some legitimacy. But the reality is that, the fishing, the lands, or the fishing waters had been damaged, but they hadn't been completely destroyed by a long shot. What had happened is that I found out that starting, it started in the late 1980s, but it intensified a little bit in the early 1990s, is that with all these foreign fishing vessels working the waters out there, a lot of the Somali fishermen realized that, with the backing of their clan leaders on land, since there was an absence of any organized government, they realized that there's some money could be made. And the money was being made by sending out groups of fishermen armed and hijacking some of these fishing trawlers. And then they would demand either a ransom, or to give it more of a legitimate twist, they would say, well, you need to have a fishing permit if you're going to continue fishing in our waters. And so they would sell these fishing permits for $50,000. So this is what was going on in the early 1990s. And so the Somali fishermen were already going out into the waters and hijacking ships and collecting ransoms or selling permits. Well, that was the real origin of Somali piracy. And for the last 20 years, this continued to grow and grow and grow. So as you can imagine, once these guys are making money selling permits and hijacking fishing trawlers and demanding permits, they're already out there in the ocean and they see all these big ships going by. And then so somebody comes up with the idea, well, why don't we try a big one? So even if, say, they lose a couple, but if you hit one, you got millions of dollars instead of, tens of thousands of dollars. So that's how this whole situation evolved. And going back, it does, the Somali fishermen do have some legitimate complaints that their fishing waters, their fish have been stolen and their fishing waters have been contaminated. But another question that people ask, that most people, think about right away is, well, say these big merchant ships are traveling around here. This is one of the busiest, the shipping lane up here is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Why don't they just fight back? Well, it's a perfectly natural question. But the answer is quite simple. There's there's been a principle at work with merchant marine ships that's gone on for well over 100 years, and it's called the right of free passage. Now, what the right of free passage is that means that as a merchant ship, you have the right to enter any port anywhere in the world, as long as you're not armed, okay? If you're armed, then you're considered a ship of war, okay? So it's been a long-standing tradition, all around the world, that merchant ships do not carry weapons. I mean, up until recently, it was to the point where it was questionable whether a captain could even have a pistol or a rifle just for self-protection. And that's why it's been so easy for all these Somali pirates to hijack so many ships, in such a short time. But things have changed, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. What I want to do now is talk just a little bit about how a hijacking actually happens and why it's so easy. Typically what happens is sometimes it's just one ship, or one boat, but usually it's about 2 or 3. And these are just small fishing skiffs with a nice, big, strong, 50, 70 horse outboard motor attached to the back. And these are what most of the Somali fishermen use. It's their the basic shipping skiff. They will approach like 2 or 3 ships. There'll be usually 3 or 4 pirates in each one. They'll be armed with AK-47s, or quite often, usually there'll at least be 1 RPG in every ship. When they'll come up alongside a big merchant ship, they'll fire an RPG fire one over the ship. If the ship doesn't try to take any evasive action or do anything about it, and just keeps ignoring, and then they shoot one close to the bridge. Now the bridge is, depending on the ship, but most ships it's on the tail end, the stern of the ship, and it's 4 or 5 stories goes up, and that's where the control, the offices and the sleeping quarters and all that for the crew are. And that's, the top will be, where you control the ship from. And so they'll shoot at the bridge, but they won't try to hit it. And usually it's enough, especially if the ship is not armed, the ship will slow down. Okay, what they'll do then is they'll throw grappling hooks, or sometimes handmade ladders with hooks, and they just climb up the side and jump on with an AK-47. Voila, you got your ship. And what they'll do then is they'll take control of the bridge. They find the captain, at gunpoint, order them to bring their ship. Typically, they get hijacked out here. They'll bring a ship to one of these communities along here. Now, these are 3 centers for pirates. And there's other communities up here as well. They'll park a ship out here, just off, as close as they can to shore, but offshore. And that's when the real work begins. They have the captain call the company that they work for, say, okay, we've been hijacked, we need some help. And that's when negotiations start. That's when the pirates will go on ship, come off the shore, and then they'll start changing guards and have guards 24 hours a day on the ship. They'll start negotiations. They'll contract with pirate negotiators who speak English typically, or whatever European language that they're dealing with. Is quite often it's English. And then they become the intermediary between the pirate organizers and the shipping company. And so these negotiations will go on sometimes for months, which is very, very typical. And during this time, though, the pirates have to keep the crew alive, and they have to keep the ship safe, because otherwise they don't have anything to bargain with. If you start killing captives, there's no point of negotiating. If you sink the ship, or you unload the cargo, you lose your bargaining point. So while this bargaining goes on, all this money is being expended, because the head pirates have to pay the guards, that the men who have actually conducted the hijacking. They have to have 24-hour security on the ships, and then they have to keep people fed. So this runs up costs, enormous costs sometimes, which in turn drives the ransoms up. So one of the things that's interesting about this situation too is who pays for all this stuff. Who actually pays the ransoms? Well, the fact of the matter is that the shipping companies don't pay the ransoms. Insurance companies pay the ransoms. Okay? So what happens is that in a lot of these situations, the shipping company becomes almost an observer in their own, in this crisis that's revolving around their ship and their crew. And what happens is that there's a cadre of specialized people that do negotiations, and they do security. They're in contact with international security forces, and so this whole negotiation process gets kicked into high gear, and it involves a tremendous number of people. And like I said, it could go on for months. And as soon as the negotiating process is completed, they reach an agreement, then the money's dropped. It's literally stuffed into bags or sometimes waterproof containers, and it's dropped by a single engine aircraft. Will drop it near the boat or near the ship, wherever it is, and the pirates go grab it, and then the money gets divided up. Right there, it's all in cash. And once that's done, the money's divided up, the ship is released, and it goes on its way. So another question people ask is, why don't we do something about this? Why don't we start fighting back? Why don't we fight back more and sooner? So like I said, when the Maersk Alabama incident happened, that really put this whole discussion, moved it from the back burner to the front burner for the shipping community. And in the middle of 2009, which was just 2 years ago, the U.S. Coast Guard issued a directive. And the U.S. Coast Guard directives for security apply to all U.S. flagged merchant ships that travel the world. And what they said is you have to begin securing your ships. Most of these measures that were being taken were what we call passive security measures. Things like putting barbed wire around the railing, the gunnels of your ship. It's a very simple thing, but it prevents the pirates from just climbing overboard, throwing a ladder or a grappling hook and climbing up a rope and jumping on board. They had some other interesting ideas, like being able to, if you see pirates coming, just get some soap, get some liquid soap and spray down your deck, so they slip. They had the same thing with foam, spraying foam out there so they fall down. Another one was electrified fencing. We've heard a lot about that lately, haven't we, from on the Mexican border. Anyway, those are some passive measures that the U.S. Coast Guard recommended and basically ordered ships that are traveling this region to do. Another thing they had was what they call high-intensity noisemakers, which is, you can imagine what these are, these giant speakers, and they turn them up with a certain frequency that is just ear-splitting. And they turn those on when the pirates are coming, and the pirates just stop. But the Coast Guard also said, if you're going to be traveling this area or outside the shipping lane within this region, they told these ships to begin hiring armed guards. And this order, in fact, was applauded by private security companies around the world. Now, these private security companies are the same private security companies that we've heard about working in Iraq, They're conducting basically a second war there, their own war there. The security companies are also the same ones that are working in Afghanistan. And all of them have created marine divisions so that when these merchant shipping companies come to securities, they say, yeah, we have crews that are trained for this. And what they'll do is they'll put a group of armed guards on the last port, wherever it might be, before they enter that area. And this has had a profound effect, of course. When the pirates realize that ships are now going to be shooting back, it's really changed the game quite significantly. It hasn't stopped piracy by any means, but it's changed the game. Another thing that the international community has done to fight back is created what you can see up there. It's called this NATO protected shipping lane. And the way this works is the vast majority of ships that are passing through the region go through this area. And this is, naval ships are stationed all along here, at the beginning, along the sides, and at the end. And what the drill is what if a merchant ship, if your merchant ship's going to be going through there, the captain contacts, it's the European, it's called UNAVFOR, European Naval Force, contacts them by radio, say, okay, this is me, this is my coordinates, this is where we are, this is when I'm going to be entering the shipping lane. And so you're in contact, you get it, you come in there, and then you travel through there. And because it's protected, the Somali pirates can't get through that. If they do, they're tracked on radar and they're intercepted. And I haven't talked about it too much, but as you can imagine, the most vulnerable ships are the old and slow ships. If it's old and slow and low to the sea level, then you're the most vulnerable. What the European navies will do is when a ship like this enters either end of that shipping lane corridor, they get a personal escort, because just so they don't take any chances. As you can see, there has been a response to the Somali situation. There has been reaction to it. But as you can imagine, the pirates haven't stopped changing either. They've adapted to the situation. So what they've done is they've extended their area of their territory far out into the Indian Ocean. And the way they're able to do this is with what are called motherships. And when I first started talking here, remember I was talking about fishing trawlers? Well, some of these are very expensive and very sophisticated shipping boats. If they can capture an international fishing trawler, they have radar, they have international telephone access, they have everything they need. They have kitchen facilities. Quite often they'll have its own supply of food. And if it doesn't have it already, then they can be equipped with everything that they need. So using these fishing trawlers as motherships, they go way, way out into the Indian Ocean. And then from there, from these motherships, is they launch the small skiffs. So they can be attacking and have attacked ships even as far away as off, or close to the coast of India. So what they've done in the last couple of years is they've extended their range to include the entire Indian Ocean. It's no longer just around the waters off of the shore of Somalia. So what happens when we capture Somali pirates? What happens when there's navies from all the different European countries working there? The U.S., China has ships out there protecting its merchant ships. So what happens is that the pirates are captured and they're taken, the majority of them are taken to a prison in Mombasa in Kenya. And this is a result of an agreement that the U.S. has signed and Britain has signed with the Kenyan government to prosecute these guys. But there's the Kenyan government has been complaining because all of these, hundreds of pirates have been basically dumped into their prison system. And so now the U.S. has taken some of these captive pirates and is prosecuting them now. Germany has done the same. Spain has done the same. France has done the same. And the Netherlands has just recently prosecuted and sentenced some Somali pirates. And also, I was talking about this earlier, in Kenya, when Mombasa is down there, but anyway, the UN, in response to this, built a special prison in Mombasa for the Somali pirates to relieve the overcrowding that was existing in the Kenyan prison systems. So, so where are we? Well, just this year, there's been 369 pirate attacks, 369 around the world. 36 of these have been successful hijackings. Okay, out of this total, 208 of these incidents have been in Somalia, or because of Somali pirates. 24 of these ships have been successfully hijacked. And today, as we sit here, there's 400 sailors are held hostage by Somali pirates. And this year so far, 15 of them have been killed, okay? Currently, the Somali pirates hold 13 vessels, okay? Some of these hostages that I mentioned earlier, the 400, there's also a growing piracy problem on the west of Africa, off the Nigerian coast. And those numbers are included in that. But another thing that's very alarming, and which I'll talk about a little bit more, is that it seems like as a result of some of what they call security hardening measures and fighting back, that there's been an increased number of attacks, but fewer and fewer successes. So what that's done is it's made the Somali pirates more desperate. And there's been, in the last month, there were 2 different kidnapping incidents in which Somali pirates had gone down into the coast of Kenya. Here's Mombasa, where most of the prisoners are. But there's some resort, well, there's resorts all along here, but the Somali pirates were attacking, went on shore there and attacked a couple ships. They kidnapped a British couple and shot they went on shore, went into this guy's cabin, and this couple killed the man and kidnapped the woman, and they don't know where she is right now, or even if she's alive. And then on October 1, pirates kidnapped a French woman in a resort right on the beach, and she was 66. She needed to have medication to survive. The pirates, of course, didn't take the medication, and she died 20 days later, just about 2 weeks ago. So, one of the questions, we have a high school class here tonight, which I was talking to earlier, and which is nice to see that interest. Now, one of the questions was, how does this all relate to us? You know, why should we care about the Somali pirates? It's on the other side of the world. Well, the fact of the matter is that estimates are approximately 80%, possibly more, of the world's goods travel by ship around the world. And the vast majority of these ships go through this region. And so every time there's a successful hijacking and ransoms are paid, well, the money has to come somewhere, and it comes from the shipping companies. The rates, the insurance rates for them to ship goods goes up rapidly every time there's another kidnapping or another hijacking. So these costs are the shipping costs, or transportation costs. These costs are buried in what we pay for all of our gadgets, our clothes, whatever, in oil, natural gas, everything that comes by ship around the world. it's, if you looked at, how much of a percentage of anything that you buy is, can be attributed to Somali pirates, it may be really difficult to estimate. But the cost is there. It's an impact. But there's another even more profound connection, and it has to do with the fact that if you're really going to do something about Somali pirates, you're going to have to control the situation on the ground. Like I had an interview with the head of the European Naval Force there, and that was the first thing he said, first thing out of his mouth. He says, if we're going to do something about Somali pirates, we're going to have to do something about Somalia. Okay? And that's a whole issue. It's a whole different issue, and it's a very daunting issue as to how do you solve that. And I have some suggestions. But when I was doing research for this, I wanted to look into a little bit about what was going on, and so behind in Somalia. And so what I did was, the real issue there, or the source of a lot of the insurgency there in Somalia is this group called al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab means the youth. Now, al-Shabaab is Somalia's answer to al-Qaeda, okay? It's a radicalized, fundamentalist Muslim organization, and they have links with al-Qaeda, but it's its own organization. And they're the ones that have been causing all the trouble. It's got a long history, and it's evolved. It's gone through various evolutions, changes in leadership. But they control large portions of South Somalia, even still. And if you're going to control... So anyway, what I did is, I decided, chose not to go to Mogadishu, although I could have. But I wasn't, what I wanted to do was to talk to Somali people about the situation, what it was like living in Mogadishu. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to fly into Mogadishu and walk around the streets and talk to people. I would last about an hour or two. And so what I did is I went to the Dadaab refugee camp, which is in Kenya there. It's marked on the map. And what was interesting about that is like the Dadaab refugee camp is the world's largest refugee camp. There's well over 100,000 people there. There's anywhere from 100 to 150 people a day flowing into that camp. And they're all coming from South Somalia. And a lot of them risked life and limb to do that. So I went to Dadaab and I interviewed people that had just come out from Somalia, just to talk about, what is it like? What is it like in Mogadishu? And so I put most of those interviews in the book. And it's just, I don't embellish it. I just let the people talk, and I just put their words, what their life is like. I ask them a few pointed questions, of course. But anyway, if we're, like al-Shabaab has been responsible for some terrible, terrible tragedies. Most recently, on July 13th, they detonated, it was the suicide bombers, detonated a couple of bombs outside the education of the ministry and killed approximately 70 people. Now these are, completely innocent people. They weren't involved with the military or whatever, but it's one of these acts of terrorism. And they just the year before they'd done the same thing, but they did it in Uganda. What they did is they attacked an Ethiopian restaurant, and then they attacked a rugby club where people were watching the World Cup in July of last year. Killed another 70 people. Now the reason they attacked Uganda is that Ugandan forces are the only forces. Uganda and Burundi have forces in Mogadishu, and they're the only ones that are really keeping the transitional government, as it's called, in power there. It's a thin line of defense, but they're basically the only barrier we have between a complete takeover by al-Shabaab and, and this government, transitional government, maintaining power, which it really doesn't maintain any power, it just kind of exists. Again, I would just talk a little bit about how does this all connect, how are we connected with all this? And I'm not trying to be an alarmist here, but the fact is that just last week, there were 2 Somali women who were part of a very large Somali community in Minnesota were convicted of aiding and abetting a terrorist group, and that terrorist group was al-Shabaab. And what these women had been doing was collecting money that was intended for to help women and children in Somalia. It was a completely worthwhile cause, but the money was being diverted somehow, and and it was ending up in the hands of al-Shabaab. So it was supporting the insurgency there. So these women were convicted of terrorism. The decisions, of course, will be on appeal. But what that is, it leads into another issue, and that is that radical fundamentalists have been recruiting young Somalis in Minneapolis, and there's suspicion of other Somali communities, the same thing's been happening in other Somali communities, to go back to Somalia and join al-Shabaab and fight. And the latest numbers I've seen that have been made public is that there's about U.S. security intelligence community has the names of 20 men from Minneapolis area who have gone back to Somalia. They're currently working and being trained with al-Shabaab. Now the thing is they carry U.S. passports, so they can come back very easily anytime. Now, I'm not saying we should run out and, oh my God, what are we going to stop these people? But this is a threat, a potential threat that's out there. And that is what links the U.S. in a very direct way, I believe, with Somalia. And it's why I think we have to pay a little bit more attention to what's going on in Somalia. We have to start taking some more aggressive action to try to establish a workable society there. And as I was telling the students earlier, this is not the only area of the world, where this happens. But what it's an example of is where, we, the U.S., as the world's uber power, as the Germans like to say, we're the 800-pound gorilla in the room. If we don't do anything, 9 times out of 10, nothing gets done. And it doesn't mean we have to send in the Marines. That's the last thing we should do. But we should be getting much more involved. We should be very much more concerned, because the longer these situations fester and continue in these countries, which are failed states, it creates these breeding grounds for really dangerous characters to not only train but then to conduct attacks. Now we went through 9/11. And that didn't happen out of the blue. It didn't happen in a vacuum. And neither will the next incident. But these are the kind of situations existing in other parts of the world which you have to be careful about. And I think it's not not a good policy to, there's a lot of discussion going on now among the political candidates. And I think we'll hear, maybe not specifically about it like in the coming election, but about this trend toward isolation, or like a return to isolationism. I think it's a very, very dangerous move. I agree with bringing troops back and downscaling these wars, but it doesn't mean that we should pull back from the world. We're only creating dangerous situations for ourselves. Well, I was good. I tried to keep it to 30 minutes and I went over, but what I would like to do now is, here, I want to show you some pictures from the camp. Is that all right? And then we'll take questions. And then when you do questions, you have to come to the microphone. But let me see if I can find my pictures on my computer here. Yeah, that's the port of Mombasa from a place called Fort Jesus, which I'd like to. That's some Somali pirates, on court in Mombasa. Camels. Saw them on the way to, when I was driving around Somaliland. That's in the refugee camp. This guy he lost his father, and he was a government official. This guy was shot in the head. You can see that's an elder. He's been fled Somalia 20 years ago. That's a woman that had just come across the border like 2 or 3 days earlier. And that's children at the reception center at the Dadaab camp, all Somali children. That's people at the gate trying to get in. They've already come all the way. That's a typical street scene in the Dadaab camp. It's a guy, he's missing his head. He's selling coal. That's the prison in Somaliland. That's one of the first pirates I interviewed. He was been sentenced to 20 years. This is the Somaliland Coast Guard. It's some shipping skiffs, shipping port called Berbera. There's typical fishermen. They're repairing boats. They're not pirates. They're real fishermen. There's a couple of fishermen I talked to on the dock. That's the guy, the driver I was telling you about. He was, I mentioned he had a friend in prison, and that's Mount Kilimanjaro. Now you can see that's the ship, and the shipping, those little green dots out there, or where they're tracking all the different ships moving through the region. That's a military exercise of boarding a pirate ship. So anyway. All right. So I'd like to take questions. I think they want you to go to the microphone and.
I just thank you for coming here, and it's a great talk. I really enjoyed it. So my question is, what's the incentive for the pirates to kidnap the French woman? Because according to the news, he lives in a pretty modest house on the beach, and his Kenyan partner, was not kidnapped. So is it simply just piracy or terrorism? And what's the cause for the terrorism? Thanks.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what I would speculate, which others have speculated also, is that they're just becoming more desperate. Mm-hmm. They're not they can't capture ships as easily as they've been able to in the past. And it's one of these situations too where I think the situation, piracy has gone on for so long. There's been a response, but it hasn't been enough to really stop it. And once these pirates are used to collecting large ransoms, if they see an opportunity to take Westerners, then they'll jump at it. The other thing you have to realize is that the guys on any specific event or incident like this, they may not be thinking clearly. They may not be the smartest guys on the block. They may be, they just have a great idea, and a couple of them start talking. Well, maybe we should do this, and blah blah blah, and you know how some of these things just snowball. But I think that the concern is that this is new. This is a new twist, and we'll have to wait and see if it evolves. But I think the motivations were very simple. Is that they took somebody. The Europeans that are there are considered. Everybody thinks that they're wealthy, whether they are or not. Potentially they could get a lot of money out of that, $500,000. So why not try it?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to go into a little more detail about al-Shabaab. Specifically, its relationship or legacy in terms of the Islamic Courts Union. You identified al-Shabaab as a major problem, but I remember during the Sirius Star incident that the Islamic Courts Union swore that they would punish pirates for stealing the Saudi ship, and that there was reports that the Islamic courts were a purveyor of settling conflicts, except for in the case of international conflicts with Kenya and Ethiopia. So if you can go a little more detail about the legacy or relationship between the Islamic Courts Union and al-Shabaab.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting aspect of it, and it's one of the, what it does is it opens up this issue about what our U.S. foreign policy has been, U.S. policy has been in Somalia, and it's been kind of, bass-ackwards, to be blunt about it. When the Islamic Courts Union were in power, they were considered a fundamentalist group, Muslim group, and a terrorist group. And so we fought them. The CIA went in and funded the other ethnic groups, other clan leaders there, to fight and to dislodge the Islamic Courts Union. But in fact, they were able to impose a lot of law and order. And when I was doing my research there, once they took over the Islamic Court Union, it was the first time that they had had garbage collection in Somalia in like 15 years. And they really started cleaning things up. But U.S. decided that these were bad guys and funded militias, and we were able to topple them. Ironically, the guy who was in charge of the Islamic Courts Union is now, we decided he was a good guy after a guy, and he's now president of Somalia. And, but, this problem could have been solved a lot earlier if we would have simply sat down and talked with the Islamic Courts Union and gotten to know these people a little bit better. Who are you? What do you want to do? What are your goals? How do you want to do this? Now, the relationship with al-Shabaab was the militant wing. It was one of the militant groups that were part of the Islamic Courts Union. And the Islamic Courts Union was an interesting entity because it was, in fact, a union of Islamic courts. Now, I don't know how much you know about Islam, but there's Sharia law, and it's law based on the Quran. And in order to, what had happened is in the absence of an organized government, all the different regions and towns there established their own Islamic courts. And so the local mullahs and local clan elders would operate these courts. And that's the way they were able to keep some law and order in each community. Well, after a while, everybody saw that this was working, and they were pretty happy with it. And so then they formed a union. But then the U.S. decided that was not a good idea. But anyway, so what's evolved now is like, now al-Shabaab has become like the large group. And they've, of course, rejected the current president, saying he's sold out. He's now a kafir, he's become an infidel. Okay.
I was wondering if you can discuss the relation between Puntland and Somaliland to the transitional government, our own country's position on them, and how 3 separate governments in Somalia could have led to different outcomes, essentially.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, and it. Right now, the transitional government is basically what's recognized as the functioning government in Somalia. And, but in fact, they only control the southern part of Somalia. Puntland, which is on the corner, the real horn of Africa, that has its own government. And then Somaliland, which is in the northern part, has its own government. So, officially, the transitional government, or at least in terms of the international recognition, represents all of Somalia, but in reality, it doesn't. And that's one of the things that I conclude with in the book, as I suggest, is that I think, what we should be doing if we're going to help solve the problem there is like, let's start with what works. And what works in Somalia is Somaliland. They have a good functioning government up there. And they're an example. They've kept law and order. They've got a functioning government, an education system, a legal system, everything. And why not use that as a base? Let's build them up and let them, direct the moves. And then let's move over to Puntland and incorporate that into it. And then from there, we'll have 2/3 of the country not under our control, but with some semblance of workable government. And then from there, let's move down to southern Somalia. And that's what I see as a more functioning way to go about it. And we already have, on the Kenyan side, we already have a sympathetic government there. And no, they'll work with us, is what I mean. They'll work with the U.S. I'm not sympathetic, but we have an ally in there. We can, if we're going to do something, they can put pressure from the Kenyan side as we move in. Yes.
I enjoyed your talk very much. I particularly found interesting the development from going out and taking the ships in to get permits and the Somalian justification for why they're doing what they're doing, the dumping of the waste and the trawlers coming along there. But what I found interesting also was that NATO's there, the Coast Guard has got directives, but is the 800-pound gorilla that we are doing anything to enforce maritime regulations that would stop trawlers from coming so close, that would stop dumping of the waste, less aggressive responses and more, say, compassionate responses enforcing maritime regulations? What has our government done in that regard, or what has the UN done?
Yeah, well, one of the things that's a nice aspect of that is that we've extended, the international community has extended the recognized territorial fishing waters of Somalia like 200 miles out into the ocean. And typically, if I remember, I'm not sure about the numbers, but typically it's much less of what's called recognized, territorial waters. It's like 15 miles or something like that. But we've extended that, the international community has, for the very specific purpose of encouraging the Somali fishermen to go back to work and start fishing again. And it's one of the things that's been depressing about that I saw when I was talking with the European naval commanders that they were talking about. They were stopping all of the foreign shipping trawlers, and they were checking for permits to make sure that they had Somali permits, and they were assisting the Somali government like this, and they did. There really wasn't, so that problem had been pretty much cleared up. But the other thing the commanders told me is that they all had a lot of fish. So whatever damage had been done by the toxic dumping has been dispersed. And the fish, the grounds are still very, very rich in marine life. So the potential is there. If the Somali fishermen want to go back to work, they could do it.
Yeah, you've noted that there are a large number of ships in that area, and you've noted that the piracy has expanded outward and further out into the ocean.
Yeah.
And you've noted that it's really the insurance companies that end up paying the ransom. So my question relates to what the calculus is of the ship owners and the captains in terms of running the risk of getting through there and assessing what they're going to do to either defend or get away. And for example, what is the percentage shot of getting through? If it's very low, then there's not much incentive.
Well, there's the chances of getting through are without being attacked are high, but you run the risk just by being there, okay? Because there's so many, there's 1,000 ships a day passing through there approximately, and up to that. But what happens is that even though there's a risk, and if you run your ship through there, you're going to have to pay more insurance. Your costs are going to be higher no matter what. It's still cheaper for them to do that than the alternative is to go all the way around southern, tip of Africa and go all the way across over to Indonesia. It's still a lot cheaper to go through. I mean, you save so much money in fuel. And then the other thing that they have to think about is like, what are the costs for putting ship or security on board? And so what they'll do is they'll put security on board just before they enter the danger zone, and then they drop them off as soon as they can when they get out of the danger zone. And so that figures into all their costs. And I'm sure, I mean, I haven't done a lot of detailed research, but I'm sure the ship owners sit down with the insurance companies and say, okay, if we hire guards and we have them on for this stretch of the shipping run, will you lower our rates? And it's probably a negotiated deal. Yeah, when you look at the total number of ships passing through there, but still it's a risk. You know, you really pay a big price if one of yours gets caught. You pay a big price, you know, and you potentially could lose crew members, which is something the European ship owners that I talked to were deathly afraid of that. They were pretty much willing to do anything, you know, they didn't want to sacrifice people's lives for that. But, you know, it's one of the issues too. I did ask some people in Kenya about that, this building boom, whether it could be attributed to influx of money. And most of them said no, that it was just a, you know, conventional wisdom that really wasn't based on any real fact. But I mean, there is money being poured into there, but to say that they're now the Somali pirates are building skyscrapers in downtown Nairobi, that's not right. Yes.
I was having trouble understanding the point about the Italian mob deliberately putting radioactive waste in the fishing waters in league with people in Somalia. Like, is that like, it sounds like another kind of extortion plot, either pay us off or we'll make all the fish radioactive, but it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. Well, what was happening, the story behind that is that there was this radioactive medical waste coming out of Europe, and there was no place, nobody wanted to put it anywhere. Nobody would agree to have it buried in their backyards. You know, it's just the same kind of problem we deal with in the U.S. So what do we do with radioactive waste from nuclear power plants? But this stuff was quite a bit smaller, and the Europeans were very, very touchy about this. So the story is, which I didn't interview Mafia to verify this, of course, but the story is that the Italian Mafia was involved in these waste disposal operations. And they had charged tremendous amounts of money to collect this stuff. And the Europeans were happy to get rid of it. Just like, get it out of here. I don't care where you go with it. Well, what they had done in turn was use some of their contacts in Somalia to come around and get permits to do some dumping out there. And it was all very hush-hush. But they were just getting rid of European waste and dumping it there. Like, there were pictures I saw when I talked about that Christmas tidal wave. There were amazing stuff. There were suitcases. It was obvious that this was trash from Western countries that had been thrown overboard. And some of this waste disposal was radioactive medical waste.
But then I would think it would be like the international community would actually be more concerned about that than about the piracy, since it.
Yeah, no, I agree. The UN did reports about it. There were interviews, there were press statements, et cetera, press conferences. It's just one of those things that just doesn't capture the public imagination. Yes.
About the courts in Kenya, are they tried by international law or martial law, like U.S. martial law or whatever?
No, they're Kenyan courts and they're tried under Kenyan law.
Okay, but the U.S. has holding cells in Kenya.
Yeah, we have agreements with the Kenyan government to do that, and there's money, we pay them money for this. And the European Union provides the money for this. That's how that happens. But it's Kenyan lawyers. I spent time interviewing quite a few Kenyan lawyers about this. And from a legal point of view, regardless of how you feel about the Somali pirates, they're not getting representation, the kind of representation they should. They're basically considered guilty as charged. The government the European money that's going to support the prosecution supports the prosecutors. It doesn't support the defense lawyers. And I was sat down and I interviewed a number of defense lawyers who hadn't earned a penny defending these Somali pirates. So of course they were just doing minimum. They were filing, filing delays, they were filing statements, but in effect there was little they could do when the prosecutors would come up and present all this evidence. They had testimonies from all the people that had captured these guys and witnesses and details about what had been done and what had been seen. There was no defense for these guys.
An additional question. How are pirates viewed, within Somalia?
How are they viewed?
Yeah, what is their place on the social hierarchy?
Well, it depends what
how do they-
community, but the communities that are making money, these guys are heroes. They're heroes. In one of my chapters, I quote this woman as she says, she's 18. These guys have money. They're driving new cars. They're putting on big parties. They're inviting the entire community. And she says, from now on, I'm only going to date pirates. So I mean, that's the reality. I mean, in that society, they're heroes. They have the money. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you for coming.
The World Beyond the Headlines lecture series is a project of the University of Chicago Center for International Studies. Our nationally recognized programming is made possible with support from the Norman Waite Harris Memorial Fund. Download recordings of other events and learn more about the World Beyond the Headlines series at the Center for International Studies website, cis.uchicago.edu.